Okay, great. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Cunha. I'm the Director of Student Housing and Residence Life here at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. Today is a big day for us. As you know, we are moving in our residents. We have about 1,300 that we're moving in today, and the rest of the 300 or so or 200 or so are going to be moving in the next couple of days. But it's a really exciting day for us. This is the first big day of residence. What I'm going to go through some of just the basics about residence, what to expect as a family member with a loved one who lives in residence, and then I'll open up for any questions after that. So first I want to say thank you. It says we've moved in. We haven't moved in everyone yet. We're still moving people in, but we're moving about 1,300 people in today. So I want to thank you for your patience. I know that there's lineups when you drove in your car and lots of people stopping you and asking where you're going and giving you directions. So thank you for participating in this big event. It's a huge undertaking. And this is a really important milestone in your student's life. I think if you ask anyone who's lived in residence in their university time, they will remember their first day of residence and remember what it feels like to leave home and stay in their residence room for the first night. So it's a really big day, and we don't take that for granted. We know that this is a really important day in your student's life, and we want to make sure that it's the best experience possible for them. Before I start, because we have so many people from all over, I want to ask a few questions. Anyone in this room, is it your first time your son or daughter or your loved one is moving away from residence, your first kid moving away from home? Great. This is also a good sense of how many questions I'm going to get at the end too. So it's kind of like I start off with that. How about your last student moving away? This is your last kid. Okay. Some smiles on your faces. I don't know if that's smiles or maybe not smile. I'm not sure. And I'm curious on who traveled the furthest. Who thinks that they traveled the furthest? We have to kind of sometimes do a little bit of, where'd you travel from? Cyprus. We might have to bring up Google Maps because it might be difficult, but yes, over here. Dubai? Yeah. Egypt. Welcome. Dubai. Welcome. To the back. Singapore. I think Singapore might have it. Unless my geography's off. Anyone think they're further than Singapore up here? Pardon? Indonesia. Oh, I'm not sure which one's further. We'll talk after the session and figure that out. Yes. Taiwan. Beautiful, amazing. Well, welcome to Canada. Welcome to UTM. Welcome to U of T. If you haven't noticed already, we have a tremendously diverse student population. So a lot of our students have traveled from many different countries all over the world. So it's nice to see you here. Welcome. We'll get started here. One of the major pieces about living in residence, it's not just a building that they live in. We build communities, and that's what we are really, really good at in residence. It's also why a lot of the people who live in residence feel so connected to campus. They live here, they meet their friends here, they have roommate conflicts here, they learn how to do laundry here, they maybe experience their first breakup here, they find out who they are here. So a lot of things are happening, but what keeps us so closely knit is our communities that we build. And in residence, we are very intentional with building community. We know that community can just happen, but we are very intentional on how we build these communities with our students. And with these communities, it also makes sure that our students are supported as they navigate university and as they navigate their lives. So we build community here. One of the things that we have in our community are community standards. So living in residence, most of the people who've lived with us have never lived by themselves before. A lot of them have lived with their parents or perhaps relied on their parents to do things that they never knew they had to do until they live by themselves. And they're like, oh yeah, you know, when I put this plate on the counter, it always disappeared in the morning, but now it's not disappearing. I wonder what's happening. It's because your parent isn't cleaning up after yourself. So you have to do it. So we have community standards in residence, and it's on our website. It's part of the residence package that your student had received. And there are rules and regulations that happen in residence. I will say that, especially for folks who are maybe outside of North America, there is a perception of what residence is like in North America. When you watch movies or TV shows where residence is like a big party space, people are having beer drinking, and there's like lots of things happening. While that can happen, that is not the culture at UTM. There are social gatherings for sure, but it's not what the media portrays it to be. But we do have residence policies in place. Some of those are like around drinking or around smoking. We have policies around if you have a roommate conflict. Our first step, if you have a roommate conflict, if someone comes to us and says, I'm not getting along with my roommate, the first thing we would say to them is, have you talked to them yet? And you'd be surprised on many of them saying, well, not yet. And we'll say, well, that's your first step. You have to talk to them. Obviously, it depends on the conflict. We'll help mediate and navigate that. But we are really treating your students like emerging adults. So we treat them as adults with extra support. And that's part of living in a community. Just some facts about residents at UTM. We have 1,503 students living on this campus. And that's in the fall and the winter term. We have 95 resident student staff. So those are a lot of the people that you saw on move-in day wearing those shirts. And I'll talk a little bit about who those staff are, but those are students who are in upper year, who live in residence and who work for us, and that help build community and help make sure that the buildings are safe and running smoothly. We have 33 families and graduate students living on campus. We don't just have undergrads, we have families that live here as well, and graduate and medical students that live with us. And we have 6 professional staff that live on campus. So these are staff with undergraduate and master's degrees who live on campus, who participate in an on-call rotation 365 days a year for anything that comes up. So there's always people here, even at 5 o'clock when everyone else goes home, residence is always here. Here are some of the benefits of residence, and this is not just random stats about residence. This is actually backed by the literature and by research. There is research that goes into how students succeed in university, and students generally do better in residence than they would off campus. And that's mostly because of the support systems that they're getting. They're living with people in their classroom or that are in class with them, and they have those supports that they might not get otherwise. Students are more likely to participate in extracurricular activities if they live in residence. They report more of a positive perception of campus life. They're more satisfied with their university experience. They report more growth in professional and personal development. They engage in more interactions with peers and faculty, and they're more likely to persist to graduation. So we're pretty proud of that. Some of the things for you to consider, like I said, this is a big transition moment in your student's life. So when we think about student transition, we think about moving in, moving through, and moving out. So in the first 6 weeks of residence, we have very specific tailored programming for our students about transitioning in. And your student will learn about this today, which is their first meeting with their residence Dawn. And we have community gatherings that they go to every week. And those community gatherings are developed through a residence curriculum that we develop to ensure that we are helping the student transition through those first 6 weeks into university. So it could be anything from how to do laundry, how to mediate a conflict, to how to get to class, or what to do when you're sick, or how to get a bank card, perhaps, if you are an international student, that kind of thing. Then moving through. So throughout the year, the first year that they have with us, we help them move through residence. Our job in residence is to get students to acclimatize themselves to university so that they can potentially move off campus. Unfortunately, we don't have enough housing that everyone can live on campus for the 4 years. We do have some upper years that live in residence, but most of our students live off campus in their second year. So our goal is to really prep them so that they learn how to live by themselves, and then they move off campus, and then they can live on their own. And that's the moving out. The transition, there's a few things that are influenced by transition. It's the 4 S's. So it's self, personal characteristics and psychological resources, the situation that they're in, so the characteristics of an event or non-event. The event is that they're moving off campus, or moving on campus rather. And then strategies, coping resources. What kind of coping resources do your students have when they are feeling homesick? what are they going to do? How do they cope with that? It could be lots of different things. But what's really important is the support piece, and that's support from you, and that's also support on campus. If you get a call from your student and they say, man, I'm feeling really lonely, but there's no one here to support me, you can say, well, I went to this session and this guy, Brian, told me that there's actually a lot of supports. So what have you explored yet? Have you talked to your Don? And your Don is your first person that you'd want to talk to. And that's the person that lives in their community, and Upper Year student has all those resources. So regardless of what that is, we train our student staff for the first 2 weeks. So we just finished training. We train them for two full weeks on all the resources on campus, how to mediate conflict, how to be on call, how to deal with an emergency situation. So all of those things that they can navigate. So they do have support systems. However, they just need to seek them out. One of the things that we do in residence, that we have orientation throughout campus. So you'll see there's lots of things happening on campus, lots of tents that you can talk to, folks you can talk to. But in residence, we have specific residence orientation. And this is the schedule. And this is also online. You can just Google residence orientation, UTM, and this comes up. But you'll see on Saturday, it was just today, we have move-in day. And then at 6 p.m. To 7 p.m., we have dinner pickup. So we are feeding all 1,300 students. We have pizza delivery. We're keeping Pizza in business tonight. And their first community meetup is at 7 p.m. And what that community meetup is that they meet with their entire floor and the Don of that community. And it's basically their first introduction to university. They get to play games, they get to learn each other's names, but it's really, really important that they go to this session, okay? Because it's going to be the first time they meet everyone. So if your student is feeling nervous about going, you can tell them that everyone is in the same boat. There's no one on their community that knows everyone. There's nobody here that it already has a familiarity with campus. Everyone's in the same boat. So really, really encourage them to go. We do take attendance at community meetups. And the reason we do attendance is because we follow up with students who don't show up. So when we meet, when the Don has meetings with them every week, they take attendance. And if that student is not showing up, then the Don will reach out to that student and say, where are you? We really want to make sure you're part of the community. So really encourage your student to go to these things, which can be scary, I know. But again, everyone is in that same boat. And you'll see throughout the week, we're doing lots of different activities. Tonight, welcome home at 8:30. What we do is we bring everyone in residence into our gymnasium on campus, and we do a big welcome. We do lots of cheers. We have cultural dances and drums, and it's basically the big sort of welcome party home into residence. Really encourage your student to go to that because it's a lot of fun. And then throughout the week, we have lots of different programming, and there's lots of programming all over campus. One thing you'll learn about U of T is that we are a decentralized system, so there's all different types of people doing different things at once. So there's lots to choose from, and your student's residence Don will be able to navigate that with your student. Some things to consider, and things that you probably have been considering ever since you realized that your loved one was going to be moving away, but they are leaving home for a new home. We really, really try to emphasize that when they're living in residence, it's not just a dorm room, it's not just a cinder block room with a door on it and a bunk bed. This is a home, and we really, really lean into that. So this is their new home. They have their home where you are, but this is their new home. So that's a really important piece for us. Managing freedom is a huge learning curve for our students. Understanding what freedom is. In high school, perhaps their teacher would be checking attendance. Most lectures they don't check attendance. So if your student is not going to class, no one will know that unless the student tells us that, unless they tell you that. So that freedom is going to be something that they're going to have to navigate, and we'll help them with that, and you should too. Changing relationships with families and with friends and family. They're going to be meeting a lot of people here. Perhaps you won't be seeing them every day, but that's something that's going to change. The change in frequency of interactions. So this happens often. In September specifically, we get parents who call our front desk and say, I'm Brian, my son, Jeremy, I haven't heard from him in 3 days. Can you put him on the phone? And our response is, we cannot. Because what I'll talk about later is we actually don't confirm whether or not your student lives with us because we're not sure who you are. We can't confirm that you're their parent. So our response is, thanks for letting us know. We encourage the student to reach out to you. Typically, depending on the situation, we might actually go to the student and say, hey, Jeremy, your parent is calling. You should really call them. But that does happen. Students forget to call their parents. They forget to call every day. So just know that that might be something that's coming. Academics will be more demanding, 100%. This is the University of Toronto. We are the top ranked university in Canada. I think we're number 19 or 18 in the world. There's a rigorous academic, it's a rigorous academic institution. So they should be prepped for that. A lot of students leave high school achieving very, very high grades, and when they go into the first year, their grades come down because they're also in class with everyone else who got high grades in all their high schools. So the expectation that might happen. So just know that academics could be more demanding. Time management and stress will be another thing that students navigate. Some students have never seen what stress feels like or how to manage their time appropriately, but we'll help them with that, and you should too. And lastly, meeting people with different identities. About 50% of the students who live on campus, 50, aren't from Canada. They're from all over the world. We have almost 100 different countries represented in residence. So we have everyone from all over the world, people with different identities and abilities. So if that's something that your student isn't used to, perhaps they're coming from a small community where it's more of a homogenous community, that's going to be something that they're going to navigate. They're going to meet lots of different people, but that's the beauty of living in residence, because I think that we're prepping them to be sort of global citizens. So this is my staff. This is the people that I lead, and this is the people that work in residence. And the majority of these people are students. And we do this intentionally. We have a student peer model because the research tells us that students respond better to students, right? You can probably agree with that. So if someone like me were to talk to a student versus someone who's maybe a year older or an upper year, they're more likely going to listen to that peer or be more influenced by that peer. So that's why we use that model. So we train all of these people to support your students, and they live in residence with your students. So this is the staff. This is a different type of staff we have, though. We have professional staff. So professional staff are staff that have completed university, work at the university full-time, like myself. Some of us, I don't, but some of our staff live on campus and live in residence. We have about 20 professional staff that live with us. And then we have professional live-in staff, and those are the staff that are on call. We have an on-call system, so we have our dons who are on call, and they report to any sort of emergencies or things that are happening on campus. We have professional staff that are also on call that they would call up to, and then we have a senior level on call that would call up to me. We also have campus safety on campus 365 days a year. One of our top priorities is safety in residence. We have our residence dons doing rounds of buildings every night. Generally, safety is a question that's asked at these sessions. While we are a campus and while we are very safe, we don't live in a utopia. So there are things that could happen. So it's important that your student uses their judgment and follows safety procedures. We have residence dons, and residence dons are kind of the jack of all trades. They are the people to welcome your student. They live in the community. Every single student has a don. When you call your student or you talk to your student next week or the week after, you should ask them, have you met your don? What's your don's name? Have you talked to your don? Because the don is available there to support them. And the don is also the one who's on call and supporting them overnight. We have resident service assistants, so we have a residence desk that's open the majority of the day, and that's where they can get access to mail, services. That's all in our OPH, our Oscar Peterson Hall, which is our main hub. So if your student doesn't live in Oscar Peterson Hall, they'd go to Oscar Peterson Hall in order to work with the folks at the desk. We have residence facilitation, residence education facilitation members who are focused on academic initiative and help support the academics in residence. And we have LLC program facilitators, and that's living learning communities. And some of your students might be living in a living learning community, and that's a specific community within residence that focuses on a specific topic, which I can talk about too. If you don't get anything from this session, please get that there are residence supports, but I'm highlighting them to you again. We have residence dons. We have on-call staff. So we have on-call staff that are on call all year, 365 days a year. We have our resident service desk, which is open from 9 to midnight or 11, I think, every day. So that's available to them. We also in residence have trained mental health and crisis professionals, and that's on campus as well. So sometimes when students are experiencing a mental health crisis or any mental health support, we have trained staff in residence to support them. And lastly, we have a specialized student support unit within my department. So within my department, we have 2 professional staff, and their main focus, their only job is specific student support. So when a student comes up, let's say a student comes up to their Dawn and says, you know, I'm managing this or I need this, and it's a complex case, we actually have dedicated staff to support that student. So we have generalized supports, and then when a student shows that they need it, we have specific supports as well. Another thing that we're really proud of is our residence education program. Like I said earlier, we have a residence curriculum that we follow in residence. And we also have living learning communities, and these are the living learning communities that we have in residence. If your student lives in the living and learning community, they will get sort of additional programming that they can participate in. And there's a faculty member that's joined into that community as well. So it's a great opportunity if they're in that community, making sure that they are participating. And for our residence curriculum, this is what we do in residence. We have over 500 community gatherings, and those are the things I was talking about earlier, where they meet with their community. 500 community gatherings. We did 145 academic development workshops last year. We had 50 large-scale events, and we did 32 faculty field trips last year. So if you get a call from your student and they say, there's nothing to do in residence, you can say, I think there's lots to do in residence. You just got to look for it, ask your Dawn. So we do lots. Like I said, we are here 365, 24/7. We don't close in the winter break. So a lot of university residences close over the winter break. We actually stay open. Your student is required to tell us if they're going to stay here. So sometimes if they can't go home, perhaps home is far away and they want to stay with us. A lot of international students stay with us. They can stay with us. We do not charge them extra to stay with us. That's included in their residence fee. But I know some residences, even some residences at St. George, I know close over the winter. We do not. We're here. This is something that we refer to, you might hear outside of this session as well. It's called FIPPA, and this is the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act. And this is a law that is in Canada that protects the privacy and information of people who reside in Canada. And so why I'm telling you this is because most of the people who live with us in residence are 18 or just about to be 18. So we can't disclose information on these individuals to people outside of the student. So that's why I said, if you call our residence desk and say, hey, I haven't talked to my student in a while, can you get them on the phone? We say, no, we can't, unfortunately. You're gonna have to ask the student to call you, or right? So we really try to focus, these are adults that are living with us while they're still learning and we're still supporting them. We can't give you information. If you call us and say, I want to know if my student is going to class, we can't tell you that unless we get specific consent from your student. So it's really important that you ask your student to call you and you check in with them as well, because we're going to be tied to this act. We can't be giving information out to parents at this stage. Off-campus housing, if you are unfamiliar with Canada, or if you're from outside of Canada, Canada right now is experiencing a housing crisis. It's really challenging to find housing in a lot of places in Canada, but specifically in the Greater Toronto area, which Mississauga falls under. When your student is moving out of residence, because most of your students are not going to live in residence in their second year, and that's not because they don't want to live in residence, it's because we don't have the space. It's really important that they start looking for housing off campus in like February or March. I know that sounds very, very early, but that's really when they should be doing it. We do lots of sessions in residence about how to find housing off campus, how to support students finding housing off campus. But one thing that my department does not do is we do not find housing for students off campus. They have to find it. We can't find housing for them. We can't act as a realtor. We can give them supports. We can talk about some risks to look for and landlords. What are some red flags so you don't, there's no funny business from landlords. We do all of that, but we can't actually find them housing off campus. And I will say off campus housing is a challenge. In residence, we have a tremendous wait list in residence. We have about 850 people on our wait list, which is high. The problem is that we just don't have housing for them. So we are trying our best to support our students. Our students here at Mississauga are not the only ones experiencing this, but finding housing off campus can be a challenge. And I don't have a perfect solution for you, but I want you to know that it is a challenge for everyone. And that's all I have. I try to give as much time at the end for questions. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer or clarify anything that I went through. But I'll open up for questions at the front. Yes, we do everything we can to take care of your loved ones that live with us. We take our jobs very seriously. We have a lot of fun, but we take our jobs very seriously. And we really think that students who are involved in residence, we don't only think it, it's in the literature, that they do better in university. So really encourage your students to step outside of their comfort zone and interact with their roommate and go to that resident event that might make them a bit nervous to go to, because there's a lot of people that are nervous. In my first year when I went to residence, I didn't go here, I went to Guelph, but my first year, I was really, really nervous to meet people, and now I work in residence. So it's really important that you challenge them to do that, because it will pay off. I'll be here in the next little bit to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you so much for today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much. Great. We're just going to start the resident session shortly. So if you're waiting to sit, please grab a seat wherever you see it available, and we'll wait for a few more people to come in, and then we'll start the resident session. Thank you. All right, good afternoon. I think we're going to start. We might have some people join as we go with it, which is okay. Welcome. This is the session for students with families and supporters who live in residence. My name is Brian Cunha. I'm the Director of Student Housing and Residence Life here at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. Today's a big day, as you have seen on campus. We are moving in about 1,300 students today. So if you were, I'm assuming you were part of that, so thank you. That's first and foremost is thank you. I know today is a lot. There's lots of cars and traffic and lots of people in t-shirts and music. And so we just want to thank you for participating. This is an exciting day for us. But 1,300 people moved in today. Thank you for your patience and your support. This is an important milestone in your student's life. If you ask someone who's lived in residence, they're probably going to remember what move-in day was like because it's such a pivotal point in their life where they meet their new friends, they meet their roommates, they get accustomed to their new home. So it's a special day for us. So we're excited. Before we start, I just wanted to get a sense of where people are coming from. Is this maybe your first child or loved one that's moving into residence? Your first one? Put up your hand. I'm just curious. Gives me a sense of how many questions I'm going to get at the end. I'm just kidding. What about your last kid? Is this your last kid that you're sending off? Any empty nesters coming? Okay. Maybe some tears at the end. We'll see. What about who thinks that they traveled the furthest to come? Where'd you come from? London, Ontario, England. Okay. There's a London, Ontario. So I just thought maybe you didn't. London, England. We have people further than that for sure. Yep. Shanghai, China. Yep. Nigeria. Thailand? Anywhere else? Singapore. Yeah. Mexico. Anywhere else? What about the closest? Who traveled the closest to get here? Who's like maybe in Toronto or Burlington or something? Where are you from? Toronto? Depends on when you go. It might feel like you're coming from the other side of the world.
Still a waiting list.
Still on the waiting list. Okay, we'll talk about that. Where else?
That's why I'm here in front.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Yep. BC. Okay, just down the road, just a few thousand kilometers away. Well, this is getting you a sense of the type of people that live in residence, our residence population. We have about 50% of our students who live in residence who are international students. So we have students who live from all over the world in multiple countries. So if you have a loved one or a son or daughter that's moving into residence, they are going to meet someone perhaps from their country, but certainly someone from another country, learn more about them, and I'll talk more about the benefits of that as well. Something that I want to highlight, that residence is more than just the buildings that are on campus. We're much more than that. In fact, we really strive to be a community. And the reason we do this is because we know that building a community in first year of university tends to lead the student to success. Make sure that, we want to make sure that they come back next year. We want to make sure that they graduate. We want to make sure that they have the supports that they need. So how we do this is we build community. We're really intentional with how we build community, and that intentionality comes from our programming and our residence curriculum to the staff we have in residence and all the support systems that we have in residence. So residence is far more than just a building. We are not just their landlord. We're far more than that. We're a support system. This is to give you an idea of who lives on campus at UTM. We have about 1,500 students who live on campus. So 1,500 students, and then in addition to that, we have about 95 student staff that live in residence. And these are staff that are mostly undergrad students who are upper year, who live in residence, who are student leaders, and they support the students who live on campus as well. So they live and work in residence. We have 33 families and graduate students. So we have families that are students that have families with children. They live on campus as well as graduate and medical students that live on campus. And lastly, we have 6, this is student housing and residence life professional staff that live on campus. So those are not students. Those are people who live on campus, who are on call, who support the operation of residence. So we don't even just have students that are living on residence or just families. We also have professional staff that live there as well. Some of the benefits of residence, as I said, building a community and what that does for students. So this is pulled from literature that comes out from students that live in residence who are more likely to succeed in university. But here are some things that you can look forward to. Students who live in residence are more likely to participate in extracurricular activities. They report more positive perceptions of campus life. They're more satisfied with their university experience. They report more growth and personal development. They engage in more interactions with peers and faculty, and they're more likely to persist to graduation. Transitioning to university, you probably heard a lot about that today, what it's like to transition to university. It's quite a milestone. With residence, though, most of the people who live in residence in their first year have never lived alone and have never lived away from their families. So we have the obligation to, we treat your children as adults, but with extra support. So they're not just living with us. We do give them the support, but there's a lot of transition there. So the first piece of the transition is moving in, and that's what we're doing today. And what we do in the first 6 weeks of them coming into residence, really focusing on the transition to university, the transition to living with people, how to navigate a roommate conflict, what is that like, how to do laundry, how to wash your dishes. We often have students who come to campus who have a harsh realization, when they said, my whole life I put my dish on the counter and it always disappeared in the morning, but now it's not disappearing. And it's because their parents were doing it for them and their parents aren't here. So that transition is what we help them with. And that's the moving in. The moving through is throughout the year. So we don't just provide them supports in the transition to come to campus, but throughout the year until they leave in April, we are focused on supporting them in their academics, supporting them as people. Our goal is to get them so that they can move off campus and live off campus, which is most of our students do. We don't have enough spaces on campus, and one of the folks here alluded to a waiting list. We have about a waiting list of over 800 people wanting to live in residence. So we prioritize first-year students, which means that second-year students most likely will live off campus. So we help in the transition for them to move off campus and learn what it's like to live off campus and with roommates. And then that's the moving out, when they move off campus and succeed on their own. The transitions, this is some of the things that we talk about in transitions that are the 4 S's. Let's see if I can scroll down here. And that's the 4 S's are self. So the personal characteristics and psychological resources that your student has, the situation of moving that they're doing right now, the characteristics of an event or a non-event, what strategies do they have for this transition? What kind of coping resources do they have? And then lastly is support. And that's through family and friends and us in residence. If you get a call from your student and they say, I'm struggling, but there's no one here to support me, you can say, are you sure? Because I went to a session where I heard there's actually lots of supports. And the first person that they should go to for those supports is their residence Dawn. And a residence Dawn is an upper year student who lives in their community with them, who we train to provide them with access to resources. So the residence Dawn doesn't do everything for them, but they're able to give them resources or send them to whoever they need to go to in order to get those resources. So that's their first step. I want to highlight some of the programming we do. There's lots and lots of programming throughout campus in the next little bit. Orientation is a big piece of that, and you would have seen some of those orientation tents on campus already starting, and we call those activation stations. But we also do some residence programming that I'm going to highlight here for our residence orientation. So you'll see on Saturday is move-in. An important piece to move-in is in the evening, so tonight. At dinner at 6 p.m. and at 7 p.m. is their first community meetup. You'll know where the community meetup is because you would have seen a letter from your residence Dawn upon move-in that welcomes you into your residence and tells you where you're going to meet. And what we do is we bring each community together, they introduce themselves, they get to know each other, and then we bring everyone in residence down to our gymnasium where we do a huge welcome home event. And that is tonight at 8:30. And we'll send them there, we'll support them going. It's not open to parents, sorry, this is only for students. This is the time where we're really going to orient them into residence and get them excited about living here. We have some events throughout the week as well. We also have some other orientation events that are happening that the student staff all know about and can help you find. But it's really important that you step outside of your comfort zone and meet people because or not you, it's going to be your students, but the student, they're not going to be the only one who's nervous and meeting people for the first time. Everyone's experiencing that. So if your student says to you, I'm not really sure I'm going to go tonight, I'm not really sure I want to go to the community meeting, you should say, it's really important that you go. It's really important that you go because you're going to meet people and you're going to see what the transition's like. So that's really important. This is on our website. If you can just Google UTM orientation and find that. You can Google UTM residence orientation and find this schedule. But all that's really easily found on UTM's website. Some things for you to consider as you transition your student into residence. they are leaving their home where they came from with you, but they're coming to our home, and this is their new home with us. This is more than just a residence hall or what we used to call dorm rooms. It's more than that. This is their home, and we really, really work hard in residence to provide them with a home. We want them to feel like this is their home, and that's really, really important to us. Managing freedom can sometimes be challenging. If this is the first time they've ever lived away from home, they've ever been on their own, having access to freedom can be a challenge, and we're here to support them. There's some questions sometimes about what do we offer in residence. There's no curfew in residence. If a student leaves residence and decides to go to the mall, we don't track that. We don't wait for them to come home. That's the kind of freedom that they get as adults. So it's important that you know that freedom is at their fingertips, and they use it appropriately. So if they're going to go to the mall and it's the first day, maybe they go with their roommate, maybe they go with a friend. Just something to consider. Relationships with family and friends are going to change, and that can be challenging, especially if they've only lived in one spot and went to one high school and had a core group of friends, and now they're moving to this brand new place where there's new people and they're going to meet new friends, and those relationships are going to change. So you can expect that, and that's okay. That's part of the experience. It's normal. Sometimes around October, you might be getting some calls about your students saying, "Oh, I'm making these new friends," or "I'm not touching base with these friends," or all these things are happening. That's normal. These changes are normal as students move into university. A change in frequency and interactions. You might notice that you might not hear from your students when the year goes on. You might not hear from them as much. So it's important that you set expectations with them. How often do you want to hear from them? How often are you going to call? How often do you want them to call you? That might change. It might be challenging because you might not be their first priority when they're here on campus and there's so much happening and they're meeting friends. So set those expectations now. Academics will be more demanding. Congratulations, your student has got into one of the most prestigious universities in the world. With that comes some academic rigor. So it's important for them to recognize that they might not be getting the same grades they got in high school. That might change. So the expectation is important for you to recognize that might be a challenge for them. But don't forget, we're here to support. Just like Michelle was here beforehand, the registrar's office is here to support. We're here to support them, but they might not be getting the same grades they got in the past. Time management and stress. Usually this comes around midterms where deadlines are stacked up and they're like, I have all these deadlines, I have all these things to do. This is really stressful. That's normal. Students are stressed and that's okay. But when it gets to a certain point, it's important for them to seek supports, and we're here to help them. And lastly, meeting people with different identities. One of the most amazing things about this campus and about residence is that we have everyone from all over the world, everyone with any different identity and religion and creed. They are all living in residence. So they will meet people who maybe they've never met before, from a country or a location they've never met before. And that's really good. That's a really important thing. I think when they live in residence, we're really setting them up to be global citizens, so they understand that there are different people out there. So if you come from an area that's pretty homogenous in terms of, or it's a small area or a small community, that might be a transition for folks. So just expect that. We have lots of different people who live here. One of the best parts about my job is that I get to lead this group of people. This is our resident staff. Which is a lot of people. There's about 100 people here. Most of these people are those student staff that I talked about, and we do this intentionally. We hire staff because we follow a peer-based model. We believe that students are probably far more likely to be guided by and listen to someone who's only a couple years older than them versus someone who they see as old. I think that's like me, but I'm not old, but you know what I mean? So we try to do a peer-based model because we know that influences students the best. Our student staff are trained. We just finished training them. We do intensive 2-week training where we train them to support these students. So it's really important that your students reach out to the staff when they need it. Here are the different types of people that work in residence. We have professional staff like me. I'm not a student. We have about 20 of our staff who are professional staff who work in the department. We have live-in professional staff. So these are professional staffs that are the staff that are not students, already have their undergrad, often their master's degree, and they live on campus. And they're part of an on-call rotation to support students, but I'll talk about a little bit later. We have our residence dons, and our residence dons are kind of the jack of all trades, let's say. They each each of your students will have a residence Don, and that'll be their first point of contact for anything that they need. So really anything that they come up with, any sort of problem, the residence Don is their first person. The residence Dons live in their communities. So they can actually go up to the residence Don room, knock on the door, and ask the question. Residence Dons also do on-call and do rounds of the building every night. They respond to urgent situations and help students navigate those. Your students, there, you'll see signs around the building that says Don on duty. So that number, they can call that number after 4 p.m. And between 4 p.m. and 9 a.m. the next day, they have access to those people. So they can, if they're locked out of their room, if they're feeling sick and they don't really know where to go, if they need some support, if they failed a test, they need someone to talk to, our Dons are there to support. Resident service assistant, these are our staff that work at our front desk. So if you think about a hotel, it's kind of similar. It's like a desk at a hotel, but we offer far more services than that. That's where students can pick up mail or packages. If you're sending packages to students, that's where they'll pick it up, or just general questions. And the resident service desk is open throughout the day to support your students. It's located in Oscar Peterson Hall, and that's where the resident service desk is, and that's where our residence cafeteria, Coleman Commons, is. We have our residence education facilitators and our LLC program facilitators. These are student staff that support with the academic initiatives that we have in residence that I'll talk a little bit about through our residence curriculum and our residence education programs. Living learning communities, if your student is part of a living learning community, they'll have an LLC program facilitator who will help them through that, but I'll talk about that too. If you didn't get anything from this session, I want you to get the support systems that we offer in residence, and I just wanted to highlight that in this slide here. So we have our residence Dons, who are our main point of contact for students. We have our on-call staff. So we have staff on call 24/7, 365, and different tiers of on-call. So it's not just student staff. We have professional staff on call. We have campus safety that are on call. So we always have people monitoring our residents. We have our resident service desk, which is open every night until 11 p.m. We have trained mental health and crisis professionals in residence. And we also have a specialized student support unit within our department. So we have within our department, we have an area that are focused on individual student support for students who are in exceptional circumstances. So if your student is experiencing a mental health crisis or needs further support, we have a dedicated staff to do that. So that wouldn't be the student staff that would manage that. The student staff would refer to professional staff, and professional staff would help out. This is the residence education that I was talking about. So we have our living learning communities that are up there. You might see that and recognize one of them that you're part of, which is really great. We also have a residence curriculum, and a residence curriculum is something that we work really hard on to build that community and to build residence education programming within residence. Last year, we had over 500 community gatherings. We had 145 academic development workshops. We had 50 large-scale events, and we had 32 faculty field trips in residence. So we do a lot of programming. There's always something going on in residence. Like I said, we're here 24/7, 365. We are open over the holiday break. So when the university closes over the holiday break in December, we are open. Your students can stay. They apply to stay in residence, but especially if they're international, they would be accepted to stay. We do not charge them extra for that, and there's still support systems over the break as well. This is something I want to highlight because it's something that we experience a lot, especially in the beginning of the year. And this is, we call this FIPPA, but it's the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act. And this is an act within Canada that prevents us from sharing information about the students who are on our campus. And you might have heard others say this, but perhaps Michelle mentioned it when she did her session. But the reason I mention this to you is because if you're, let's say you want to get in contact with your student and you call our residence desk and you say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so's father. I'm looking for so-and-so." We won't even confirm that the student lives there. And the reason we do that is to protect the privacy of our students. So it's really important that you set expectations with your student to contact you. If you call us and you say, "Hey, Brian, I'm just curious if my son or daughter is going to their community gatherings. Are they going to classes? Can you give me an update on the student?" I will say, "I can't do that. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to contact your student on your own." It's really this in-between transition period where we treat them as adults with extra levels of support. So it's really important that you know that we won't be able to give you information unless it was consented by the individual. Okay. There is exceptional circumstances where we'll call home, but those are exceptional. But we really encourage you to contact your students and get them to contact you. If you are not from Canada, and if you are coming here for the first time and you're unfamiliar, if people from Canada are well aware, we're in the middle of a housing crisis here in Canada. The housing stock is low. It's really challenging for everyone, not just students, to find housing, specifically in the Greater Toronto Area, which Mississauga falls under. This also puts a lot of pressure on students, and it puts a lot of pressure on residents. Like I said, our residence waitlist has over 800 students. A lot of people want to live on campus. We just do not have the beds for them. So we do offer some off-campus housing supports, and on our website you can find some off-campus housing supports. We cannot find a space for your student off campus. We can give them supports on how to find spaces, but we can't act as a realtor and find those spaces for students. So we know that a lot of students are struggling finding housing right now. You may be on the wait list. As I said, that 800 wait list. Depends on where you are in that wait list. We are prioritizing first-year students on that wait list. And that waitlist is a live waitlist. So sometimes students don't show up on move-in day, and we'll fill in spaces. And sometimes students leave in September, and then we fill in those spaces. The reason that the waitlist moves quick is because when we contact people on the waitlist, sometimes they've already found housing, and so we go down the waitlist. So the waitlist actually moves faster once we hit September, if that makes sense. I can answer more questions about the waitlist as well, but I just wanted to highlight some off-campus housing. Mississauga is not similar to some college or university towns where all students sort of live in one area. Students live throughout Mississauga. A lot of students live by Square One, which is our sort of big mall in downtown Mississauga. Some students live by the Sheridan Center, which is a bit closer, but there isn't necessarily off-campus housing that's around the perimeter of the campus. The campus doesn't really have student housing around the perimeter, but students have access to their bus pass. So most students who live off campus take transit, and Mississauga has great transit. So I can answer more questions about off campus as well at the end when it comes.